Who does the Department of Justice work for? That was the question Senator Chris Coons asked point blank, and the silence that followed told you everything you need to know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDonald, thank you for your dedication to federal service, to your wife, to your children, to your parents, to your family. Thank you for your recognizing the blessing of the opportunity to serve. I am interested in hearing your perspective, not just on the role you're being nominated to, but the general direction of fraud enforcement under this administration. Look, Americans, Delawareans, folks of all backgrounds rely on critical federal programs. And when the money that is supposed to be spent by those programs is diverted to fraud, is stolen, that reduces the amount of resources available to do good in our society. And I agree with you. We need to make sure that Americans' tax dollars are spent wisely and those funds are going where they really should go. I am concerned, however, the administration is less concerned with specifically fighting fraud than with targeting people and states it dislikes or that it has a partisan agenda against. One of the reasons I've got this concern is seeing that at the same time the administration's creating a new DOJ division and suggesting it may be directed by the White House, they have shut down or eliminated or defunded other anti-fraud units like the Consumer Protection Branch, like the Tax Division. I think if President Trump were serious about combating fraud, he'd be applauding the great work done by the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office under the previous administration to tackle social services fraud instead of running attorneys out of that office. And if he were serious about tackling fraud, he wouldn't be pardoning the very people that dedicated career prosecutors like yourself spent years investigating and prosecuting for stealing from American taxpayers. Let me just start with you, Mr. McDonald. You've spent almost your entire career at the Justice Department as a nonpartisan, apolitical prosecutor. Who does the Department of Justice work for, sir?
Senator, first, with respect to some of the assertions in the lead up to your question,
it's a pretty simple question. Who's the Department of Justice work for, sir?
Senator, I do want to point out that in the last year, the DOJ has had record-setting years in the area of fraud. Under the False Claims Act, we recovered 12%.
Fines collected from anti-money laundering violations are down 54%. Investigations into tax fraud schemes are down 63%. 25,000 federal agents, including many folks I suspect you worked with, dedicated to investigating white-collar crimes, have been diverted to immigration enforcement. Let me move on to just a simple point I wanted to put in front of you. It takes a huge amount of work and investigation and time for you and other dedicated prosecutors to develop a case, to bring it, and to win a conviction, correct?
Senator, there is an extensive amount of work that goes into every federal prosecution, and that's because on the right side of the V is a human being
correct,
that has rights that must be protected, and we do that every day in the Department of Justice with a mind for the names on the right side of the V.
And balancing that is a key part of achieving justice, which you are dedicated to. So then how do you explain to your team or to a group of prosecutors who have spent years, a case like Trevor Milton, the founder of Nikola Corporation, he committed securities and wire fraud for misleading investors. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was ordered to pay nearly $700 million in restitution. In October of 24, he and his wife gave $1.8 million to the president's campaign. He was subsequently pardoned in March of last year, eliminating not just the sentence, but the massive restitution. I'll give you the case of Lawrence Duran, the owner of American Therapeutic. He pled guilty to defrauding Medicare of $200 million and was sentenced to 50 years in prison and ordered to pay $87 million in restitution. In May, the president commuted his sentence and pardoned him also, including restitution. How would you explain to your dedicated career team that's investigating fraudsters the president's repeated pattern of pardoning folks, of forgiving not just their sentence, but their restitution obligations in exchange for political contributions?
Senator, respectfully, I do disagree with assertions made there in the lead up to your question. What I will be doing with my team is I will be equipping them and I will be ensuring that they have everything that they need to go after this fraud better than we've ever done it before.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Counsel, congratulations on your nomination.
This exchange wasn't complicated. It wasn't a trick question. It was a basic test of Democratic loyalty, and the nominee couldn't pass it. When Chris Coons asked who the Department of Justice works for, he wasn't asking for statistics, deflections, or talking points. He was asking whether the DOJ serves the law and the American people, or whether it's being reshaped into a political weapon for those in power. Instead of answering directly, the nominee dodged, pivoted, and hid behind selective numbers, as if data could replace principle. That avoidance matters, because at the same time this administration claims it's tough on fraud, it has hollowed out the very units that prosecute fraud. Consumer protection weakened, tax enforcement slashed, white-collar investigators reassigned, career prosecutors sidelined. And then, in the most brazen move of all, convicted fraudsters, people found guilty of stealing hundreds of millions from taxpayers, are handed pardons after donating to Donald Trump. That's not law and order. That's pay-to-play justice. Coons exposed the contradiction with devastating clarity. You cannot claim to defend taxpayers while pardoning billion-dollar thieves. You cannot claim to respect prosecutors while erasing years of their work with the stroke of a pen. And you absolutely cannot claim the DOJ is independent if its leaders can't even say out loud that it works for the American people. Not the president, not donors, not political allies. This is the quiet corruption people need to understand. It doesn't always look like shouting or chaos. Sometimes it looks like a nominee calmly refusing to answer the most fundamental question in American democracy. And that refusal should alarm everyone. Because if the Department of Justice no longer belongs to the people, then the rule of law itself is up for sale. This moment deserves attention, outrage, and action. Share this, talk about it, hold these nominees accountable, and keep demanding a justice system that serves democracy, not power.